Hi Bookish Besties, my name is Brittany. This is Rescues and Reads. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you are new, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're already subscribed, as always, I appreciate your continued support. Thank you for returning to another video. Today it is time to do my December reading wrap up. All right, everyone, it is time for the final wrap up of 2024. We are doing things a little bit differently this time. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I am not bringing the reading roundups into 2025. And since I've already done my haul and unhaul, I did it during Bookmas. And since I've kind of done some year-end stats at the first of the year, I decided I would just do a traditional reading wrap up for December. So that is what we are here to do today. Throughout the month of December, I did a bookish advent calendar. I had stockpiled books that I received as part of wish list gifting events. I didn't open them. I had no idea what they were. I had my husband wrap them, and then I opened one every other day or so and read them all prior to Christmas, and thankfully I was successful with that. Please let me know if you would like to see me do something similar or even exactly the same thing in December of next year. I'm happy to start that process with January's wish list book that I'm probably about to receive sometime here soon, so let me know what you think. The very first book that I read as part of that project was Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I was really excited to read this because this was the final TJR that I needed to read in order to read her to zero. This is actually her debut novel, so I knew to give her a little bit of grace. This follows our main character Elsie, and she meets Ben one night randomly. I think it's on New Year's Eve night. They're both waiting for their pizza, and they have an instant connection and chemistry, and they kind of start dating immediately after that. They have this whirlwind romance, and they ultimately end up eloping in late May, so they really only know each other for about 6 months by the time they are engaged and married. And only 9 short days after they are married, Ben is tragically hit by a truck when he is biking his way home. And naturally, Elsie is just so incredibly consumed by grief. And this is further complicated by the fact that Ben's mother did not know about Elsie. Ben's mother is pretty much the only one he had in his life. His father was gone. He really had no other family. And Ben never really got around to telling his mother. Now, there were specific reasons why that was. I didn't necessarily agree with them, and they became more frustrating as the book went on. Her only son has been killed, and she is definitely coming to be involved in the process. Once again, you are shaking because Archibald is in here rubbing himself all over my tripod. I am so terribly sorry. This is kind of like 2 stories in one. You are following Ben and Elsie's relationship as it develops from the first day they meet until Ben passes away. And then you are following the aftermath of that in the present day timeline. So as Elsie is grieving, but also as she's getting to know her mother-in-law. And at first that relationship is very, very rocky. They don't get along very well, but soon they start developing this really, really strong relationship, and they kind of lean on each other in their times of grief. Now, I definitely love this story in the same way that I love all Taylor Jenkins Reid. I thought that it was incredibly well written. I thought that it was certainly thought-provoking, and there was definitely a harder hitting element to the story. But I am not necessarily a person that believes that somebody can be in true never-ending love with somebody within 6 months. I'm kind of somebody who believes that you should be with somebody for at least 6 months before you even contemplate getting engaged, and before you get married you should live with that person and all of this stuff. I know that's probably an unpopular opinion, but I think that 6 months is still very much within the honeymoon phase, and I feel like you need to live life with somebody more before you can truly say that you love them unconditionally and you want to be with them forever. So even though I felt like Ben and Elsie's relationship was fully realized, like you get it from start to finish, you get all of the characters, and it was very character driven in that way, I never really fully emotionally invested in that relationship because I thought that it was too short, you know what I mean? So there definitely were some technical issues that I had with this. Overall, I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars. Next, I read The Warsaw Orphan by Kelly Rimmer. I was excited to get to this because I had read a Kelly Rimmer previously and I really, really enjoyed it. I was a little bit let down by this one purely for the fact that I really don't feel like this book knew what it was trying to do or the actual story it was trying to tell. The way that this book is pitched, like if you read the synopsis of this makes it sound like you're primarily going to follow a girl named Elżbieta, and she gets involved in a resistance movement in the Jewish ghetto in Warsaw that involves smuggling children out of the ghetto. And through this time she meets Roman, who is a Jew living in the ghetto, and it's about their developing relationship. But her smuggling children out of the Jewish ghetto was actually a very, very small portion of the story, but I felt like that point of the story was where it peaked and everything else was just kind of a downhill slide. For specific reasons, Elżbieta has to stop going to the Jewish ghetto. Then there's this huge resistance movement and Roman is able to escape the ghetto. He ends up injured on Elżbieta's doorstep, and over 10 months she helps kind of nurse him back to health. And throughout this time they supposedly develop this really strong, amazing friendship, but you don't see any of that on page. It's very much an all tell no show situation. And so after this 10 months they are supposedly in love, and you don't connect to that in any way because sometimes you don't see it. Roman was a pretty frustrating character because he was very, very angry and he was willing to do whatever it took to free Poland. It didn't matter what it took. He was willing to die for the cause. He wanted to be a martyr for the cause, actually, because he didn't want to see Warsaw under any type of control. And so he was constantly putting himself in very dangerous situations, which was frustrating. And this book just kind of felt like it went all over the place. And like I said, I don't really feel like it knew what it was trying to do. I really wanted it to focus more on their time in the Jewish ghetto smuggling children out. I think that I gave this overall like a 3 stars. I don't know if I'm going to be keeping it, but for now I do have it. Next, I read Grey After Dark by Noelle W. Ely, and this was an author that I had never tried before, so I was really excited to get into it. This follows our main character, Miley, and she is actually an athlete who is recovering from a very serious accident. It's one that left her seriously injured and it took her mother's life. It's been several years and she's now trying to get back into shape for the Olympics that are coming up in a few years. And in the meantime, over the summer, she is working at this kind of like summer resort type situation. And every day she goes for a run in the woods. And during this time, she is kind of having a cool off in a lake and she encounters 2 dangerous men who end up kidnapping her. And so you're following her as she's kidnapped by these 2 men, and she's encountering another woman who was previously kidnapped by them. And she realizes that this is a woman that worked where she currently is working, and everybody thought that this girl was eaten by a bear, but she's very, very much alive, and she's kind of got serious Stockholm syndrome at this point. She claims that she loves her life there. She is very subservient. She's doing everything that these guys say, and she's really not willing to help Miley at all. And so you're following Miley as she's trying to survive. She's trying to do everything she can to escape, but also to kind of convince them that she's been broken. She's been tamed, essentially. She's a tame girl. And also, you're following Miley's best friend slash love interest as he is desperate to find her. He does not believe that she is dead, so he spends weeks in the woods tracking her, trying to figure out where she is. And I thought that this was actually a really good representation of a true thriller. It was really, really high stakes. It was really intense and suspenseful. You had no idea where it was going to go, and there was definitely a survival aspect to both perspectives. And I really had a great time with this overall. I gave this a 4 stars, and I would absolutely be willing to read more from this author in the future. Next, I read The Family Experiment by John Marrs. This was a gift from Andrea, so thank you so much to Andrea for this gift. Also, Grey After Dark was a gift from Sherry, so thank you, Sherry. I was nervous going into this one because my last experience with John Marrs with The Marriage Act was not great, but I did love The Passengers, so this was kind of going to be a tiebreaker, and thankfully I loved this. This is set in that same near futuristic world as The Passengers and The Marriage Act, and essentially in this time, the world is overpopulated, there is an economic crisis, and nobody can afford to have children. And so there's this company who is basically rolling out the idea of virtual babies. They have created this whole incredible metaverse that you can go into and you can have different experiences and you can build your house and you can do whatever you want. And within this metaverse, you will be able to raise your child from newborn basically up until their death, right? And this is going to be available to people for a monthly subscription fee. But to roll this out, they're going to be doing a reality television show where they're going to give 10 couples the ability to compete. They're going to raise one of these virtual babies from birth to 18 years in the span of 9 months. It's going to be a reality television show, so people are going to be able to watch this happening. They are going to be able to like comment and see who deserves to win, and whomever wins at the end, they are either going to be given the money to start a family of their own, or they are going to be given the opportunity to keep their virtual baby, which, you know, they will have raised for these 9 months. And every single one of these couples are in this competition for a specific reason. They are all hiding something. They all have something going on in their past. And so it was really fascinating to kind of see that unfurl as you were reading the story. In some ways, it was a little bit hard to keep track because there are 5 different couples that you are getting their perspective. So you have to keep track of who they are, what their backgrounds are, who their virtual child is, and like all the stuff that's going on. But eventually I was able to get it. And ultimately I just found this incredibly compelling. And I think that I gave this like a 4.25 stars. I loved this book. Another book that I absolutely loved, Drowning by T.J. Newman. I had read Falling by T.J. Newman earlier in the year and I enjoyed it, but not to the extent that I enjoyed this. So this follows a flight. It has just taken off and almost immediately there are problems. And within several minutes, the plane has crashed into the ocean. And you're following everybody as they're trying desperately to get out of the plane. But there is a gentleman on board. He's an engineer and he says that it's actually safer if they stay on the plane. So him, his daughter, and about 10 other passengers, they actually stay on the plane, but soon the plane starts sinking under the ocean. It has landed nose down, butt up on the edge of a cliff. And so you're following them as they are trying to survive this ordeal, but you're also following people topside who are trying to save the people who are in the plane. And it was just a very harrowing, very compelling, fast-paced, high-intensity, high-stakes time. Normally those books do not work for me because I'm a very character-driven reader, but TJ Newman actually managed to make me care for some of these characters and get emotionally involved with some of these characters, and I was really surprised by that. I was not expecting that to happen at all. I honestly gave this a 4.5 stars. I was not not expecting to love this as much as I did, and I'm very excited for the new release that just came out in 2024. Next, I read A Home for the Holidays by Taylor Hahn. So this follows our main character, Mel. She is a wedding singer, and she has a complicated relationship with her mother. Growing up, her mother always made the holidays very, very magical, but her mother also failed at a lot of other simple, normal mothering things because her mother had a problem with alcohol. And as she's gotten older, Mel has kind of learned to distance herself from her mother. She loves her mother dearly, but she can't always be around her because it's very toxic, right? So they're not necessarily estranged, but they aren't besties either. And at the beginning of the story, it is nearing the holiday season, and Mel gets the call that her mother has passed away. She was in the hospital. Mel had no idea. And so she's dealing with a lot of complicated emotions here, right? This is complicated grief because, like I said, she loves her mother dearly, but she also recognizes the flaws in her mother. She's also very angry at her mother for being the type of person that she was. And then one day, a woman shows up on her doorstep, a woman named Barb. She doesn't know this woman, but this woman claims that she was Mel's mother's best friend 35 years ago. They had a falling out for a very good reason, which you find out later on in the story. They haven't spoken in all of this time, but Barb heard about Mel's mom's passing, and she wanted to connect with Mel, and she wanted Mel to know her mother the way that Barb knew her mother. Over the next couple of weeks, you're kind of following Mel as she's getting absorbed into Barb's life. She is staying in Barb's house, trying to kind of deal with her grief and learn about her mother. And at this time, Barb's children show up, including her son, Henry. And you're also following a developing relationship between Mel and Henry. I really enjoyed this book from start to finish. I was really compelled from the first page. I was really invested in the characters and their story. And I actually really appreciated Mel's relationship with Henry. But my main complaint was that it happened entirely too fast. Both Mel and Henry are going through some very tough, complicated things. Henry is in the middle of a divorce. It hasn't been finalized yet. He's only even just now told his mother that they're getting a divorce, so that's like in the very beginning stages. Mel has obviously lost her mother, but she just ended a 3-year relationship. And I would say within a week or two's time, both she and Henry are like building a relationship with each other. They are telling each other that they love each other. And I was like, I don't feel like this is the right point in your life to build this relationship. But for the most part, I really enjoyed this story. I gave it a 3.5 stars. I would absolutely be willing to read more from this author in the future, and I thought it was the perfect read for this time of year. Next, I unwrapped The Coworker by Freida McFadden, and I had a brilliant time with this one. I think that this is probably one of my newest favorite Freida McFaddens just because, once again, I found it compelling from start to finish. You know with a Freida McFadden that you're going in, you're going to get a good, fun, fast, bingeable time. It's a candy read, right? It's a popcorn thriller. You just kind of want to keep turning the pages. It's not necessarily anything substantial. But this follows our main character, Natalie. She is a sales representative for a vitamin supplement company. She's like their top sales representative, and she works next to Dawn Schiff. Dawn Schiff is the accountant for the company, and one day Dawn Schiff doesn't come to work. That is very, very unusual. Dawn Schiff is a very routine, regimented person. She was very by the book, black and white, rule following. She was always there 15 minutes early every single day. You could essentially live your life by Dawn Schiff's clock, right? You knew where she was going to be at any given time of the day. Natalie automatically thinks that something is wrong, but nobody believes her. And then she answers a call that's coming into Dawn's desk phone, and it's literally somebody just saying, "Help me." Natalie ends up going to Dawn's home where she finds a puddle of blood. She immediately calls the police, but she doesn't expect to be the main suspect on the police's radar. Now, you're also getting Dawn Schiff's perspective in this book because she is sending emails to her best friend who lives across the country, and she's talking about all of the things that have been happening at this vitamin supplement company and how Natalie has been treating her. So you're getting two very different perspectives, right? Natalie says that she wasn't necessarily Dawn's friend, but they were friendly, they were nice to each other, and she was worried about Dawn. Dawn is painting an entirely different picture. So you're not entirely sure who to believe. So overall, I did really enjoy my time with this. I enjoyed the twists and turns that Freida McFadden always takes me on, and I gave it a 4 stars. Immediately after The Coworker, I picked up The Clinic by Kate Quinn. This follows our main character, Meg, and her sister Haley is actually a super famous, I believe she's a famous actress, and she has checked herself into rehab because Haley has the reputation of being a party girl. She's a drug addict and things like that. She's always getting herself into trouble. So when Meg finds out she's in rehab once again, she really doesn't think anything of it. Then she finds out that her sister Haley has died in rehab, and everybody's saying that it was either a suicide or an accidental overdose, and Meg doesn't believe either one of those things because, first of all, she doesn't believe that Haley would have ever committed suicide, but also Haley died of a heroin overdose and she didn't use heroin. So Meg is immediately suspicious and she decides to check into the rehab. Now, Meg has her own problems. She has a problem with alcohol. She also has a problem with prescription drugs. It's not necessarily far-fetched that she should be in this rehab, right? So you're following her as she's doing this investigation, as she's also coming into contact with the therapist there at the rehab, as she's coming into contact with the owner, the handful of elite clientele that is also there, and any one of them could be a suspect. So I would say that my reading experience of this was fine. I was decently engaged throughout the entirety of the story, but my problem is that I felt like this entire thing was flat. The characters were flat. They were very underdeveloped. They didn't really have much of a personality. They were very two-dimensional. All of the reveals, they weren't necessarily shocking or anything unexpected. expected. I wasn't exactly thrilled by everything that was happening. I gave it like a 3 stars, and I will promptly forget everything that happened in this story. Next, I picked up Between You and Us by Kendra Broquis, and this is an interesting take on the sliding doors trope. So this follows our main character, Leona. She's heading to a very fancy restaurant to celebrate her 10-year anniversary with her husband, David. It has been a very terrible, hard year of loss and grief. They lost their daughter, and she's trying to get back to the way that they were, like trying to move on and build another life for themselves, right? But when she walks into the restaurant, David is very different. He is not his normal self. He's very cold. He's very distant. When they leave the restaurant, she's taken home in a Camaro she didn't know they owned. She's taken to a home that she recognizes, but not a home that they live in. And the most important difference of all is when she walks into the home, her daughter Vera is still alive, and she is the age that she would have been had she survived. So Leona quickly realizes that this is not her life. She is in some kind of alternate timeline, right? And that is what this really plays on. This plays on the multiverse. So something happened, a catalyst that caused Leona to go into this alternate timeline. So you're following her as she's trying to figure everything out in this present timeline, but you're also following her relationship with David from the time that they met like 10 plus years ago all the way up to when they lost their daughter. So you're getting those two perspectives. And Leona is definitely struggling. She's struggling on whether or not to go back to her David because her daughter is not there, right? In this timeline, she's able to be a mother to her daughter. And I'm not going to say anything more about like how it ends up or the decision that she ultimately makes, but I thought that this was a really, really interesting take on the sliding doors trope. It was also very, very thought-provoking as you wonder what you would do in this situation. And ultimately, I was very, very satisfied with the resolution of the story. I thought that this was really well written. I would absolutely be willing to read more from this author in the future. So I give this a solid 4 stars. Then I picked up Rental House by Weike Wang. And unfortunately, this was a really big disappointment. I thought that this was primarily going to be a story about a Chinese American woman and the complications that come with being in an interracial relationship. Her husband is white, and I thought this was going to be about like all of their families coming together on a vacation and all the conflicts that ensue. I don't know if I misread the synopses of it or what, but ultimately this book felt very, very pointless. In the first half of the book, they are on vacation, and then Karou, our main character, her parents come to visit from Minnesota, and you're following their dynamic and the challenges that she faces with them and the culture shift there because she is a hyphenated American, right? She is Chinese American, and she has to deal with the expectations of her very much Chinese family and just the American culture in general. So you're following that conflict. And then after they leave, Nate's parents come. So the parents are separated. They're never together at this time. And Nate's parents are portrayed as very backwater Americana. They're from Appalachia, so you know they're considered very backwards. They have ignorant ideas. They say that they're not racist, but they have all of these microaggressions and things like that. So Weike Wang definitely portrayed them in like the worst case scenario for a person like Karou. Ultimately, this didn't really feel like a richly examined portrayal of these cultural conflicts and differences. Karou felt very much like she was just complaining. She was apathetic. I really just didn't like her character. I didn't like being inside of her mind. And the second part of the story was her and Nate going on a vacation on their own and the people that they encounter during this time. I could never get a grip on Karou's personality because, like I said, at some point she felt very apathetic, like she didn't care at all. She was complaining constantly, talking about her grievances with her parents, with Nate's parents, with being a hyphenated American, the struggles of the immigrant experience and all of that. And then while she's on vacation with Nate, you know, you start to see her want to open up to people and have connection. And this is also supposed to be a portrait of a marriage, but that wasn't well developed in here at all. I really didn't feel like there was any kind of connection or chemistry between her and Nate. In fact, I wasn't even really sure why they got together or if they loved, like I didn't even feel any love between them. You know what I mean? So this was very underdeveloped in my opinion. And it just felt like the most negative portrayal of both the Chinese and American cultures and everything that happens in the immigrant experience. And I was just like done. By halfway through this book, which was not very long, it was only 214 pages. I was done. I was ready to be over. And I gave this a 2 stars. One of the worst books that I read in 2024. And it was one of the most pointless. I have no idea what I was supposed to get out of this book. I didn't feel like it was the richly nuanced book that I was expecting going into it. And I'm very, very disappointed by it. All right. And the very last book that I read is one that I chose completely on my own. The last books that I unwrapped for the Advent Calendar Challenge were books that I already read. So I was able to just select what I wanted, what I was in the mood for. I was in the mood for something light that wasn't going to require too terribly much thought. And so I picked up the 4th book in the Finlay Donovan series called Finlay Donovan Rolls the Dice. I obviously can't tell you too terribly much about this story because it is the 4th book in a series, but this is kind of classified, I want to say, as a cozy mystery series, but I would definitely say that it's far more high stakes than your traditional cozy. There is definitely a lot going on. It's very complex for what it is. Like I wasn't expecting that. And while you do have to suspend your disbelief, it is very well woven and crafted. I think it's very well written. I love Finlay Donovan and the crazy characters that surround her in her life. I just find it to be a very fun and engaging story. And I highly recommend if you are looking for something that may be cozy adjacent, but is definitely more complicated and high stakes, I think Finlay Donovan is something that you could definitely enjoy. All right, everyone, that is it. Those are all the books that I read in December. Finlay Donovan was the very last book that I read for the year, and I'm quite happy with it. It's my favorite one of the series so far. If you have read any of the books that I talked about today, please comment down below and let me know what your thoughts are, and let me know what books you ended 2024 with. I would love to know. Or if you've made it to the end of this video and you are not feeling chatty, go ahead and leave me a dice emoji in honor of Finlay Donovan. And as always, if you like this video or if you just like me, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. I typically post 2 videos a week, one on Wednesdays, one on Sundays, and I would love to connect with you in any of those future videos. Or if you would like to connect with me outside of YouTube, you can always find links to my Goodreads, Instagram, and Patreon linked down below, along with any books talked about in the video. Until next time, y'all, bye.